Awesome. Thanks, David. So what we're going to start with are sort of going through each one of the different ways that I used a technological tool to support professional learning. The first thing that most folks probably noticed is my interest in using lots of visuals. And so the first tool that we're going to be talking about is called Adobe Spark Post, or Adobe Spark. Adobe Spark is a tool that that really allows for and really enables you to create your own professional looking slides. And so the slides themselves are really important to sort of focus on, as they are representing you, they are representing Aurora, they are representing a lot of the ideas. And so starting with Adobe Spark is a really good place to start with your own facilitation. So if you go to spark.adobe.com, you can actually sort of start to play around with it yourself as we're going through the tutorial. And I'm just going to copy into our chat the links as we go through. But if you do want to hop on the actual video, you can do that too, and we can have that conversation. So Adobe Spark, I'm just going to log in and I'm going to use my Google account. You can use your district Google account. You can use your private Google account. It doesn't really matter. But I find that logging in using a Google account makes it so that I don't have to remember passwords and all that kind of good stuff. And so we'll just allow so that you actually have access to the visual. And we'll take a look at sort of how I created one of these visuals simply by typing in a few words. So the way it works on the desktop, so it's just sort of loading over here, is that you will start with the words that you want the slides to say. And I try and keep the words down to a absolute minimum. So the fewer words, the better on a slide. And if I'm doing any kind of bullet pointing, then I'm not going to use this tool for that part of it, because the bullet points I want to be able to mess around with and sort of change and things like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually just do something like, let's say, learning, right? So one single word. Now, if I don't change any settings, it's going to present it as a square, which doesn't really work great for a slide. What does work really great for a slide is actually if you go to resize and you change it to the 16:9 perspective, which is sort of what most slides are formatted as. And so you have this 16:9, and that allows you to sort of mess around with it a little bit, but making it look more like the same aspect ratio as a slide. So now let's change the background. Right now it's just kind of this, looks like maybe carpet or something like that. So if I click on background and then actually, that was really quick. So background and then replace photo up in the top right here. You can either upload a photo or you can grab it from another location, but the best thing about Adobe Spark is that you can actually search through photographs that are already of high quality, and you actually are Creative Commons licensed. So you don't have to worry about, citing the source and asking for permission and all of those kinds of things. So I'm just going to type in learning into this particular search field, and I find this picture of some awesome books over here. And if I move this over, right over here, then I see the books over on the right, and I see this over on the left. So now that I've got an image I like, what I can do is I can mess around with the filter on the photo. It's sort of giving it a yellow, but let's say that I actually want that color to be sort of the way that it is. Or I want it to be with this, let's go with, this is a little bit brighter of a color on that particular photo. And it did refresh there just very quickly. It's okay if it does refresh, because it's a application that you are running on your computer, and every once in a while it says, you know what, you're probably going to need to try again. And so I'm just going to very quickly hop back in In general, I don't find that it does that very often, but I want to go and grab that same photo. But I think I may have hit the refresh button. Oop, this one. So if I go over here, once again, I've got my photo, and then I would like to change it back to my lovely Fremont, which gives it a nice bright feeling. And then I'm going to mess around with the text a little bit. And it gives you style suggestions, so you can just use this slider going around here to see what other kinds of suggestions it might have for you. It'll change the format of the text, do all kinds of different stuff. But if you want to mess around with it yourself, you can actually go in and change the shape. Let's say you want that one. I like that a whole bunch. So I'm going to just make it a little bit smaller. But let's say I don't like the text. And I can play around with the text as well. Let's say I want it to be something like the permanent marker. So we'll have it be learning like that. And so I'm going to save it. And now I've got this awesome picture. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger so you can see it a little bit better. But I've got this awesome visual that all I have to do is click on the share button. And you can download it or you can share it out. But most often what I do is just download. And based upon this, I can simply add it over here. And now it is my slide. And so you can do text on top of that slide. You can do whatever you want to with it, but it's very, very easy to create that feeling of, I have put a lot of thought into this. I have really created these visuals in a way that supports the learning that I want. And my favorite thing to do inside of Google Slides is to then use the facilitation notes to make sure that the visual is sort of matching the words that I'm saying or the questions that I want people to ask. And so every single one of the slides that we did in the facilitation was created using the Adobe Spark platform, okay? Now on this slide, the outcome slide, you'll notice that I only created the image right here for the background and the word outcomes. Everything else is actually just text that I have written on the slide. And so that makes it so that I can, if I need to change the outcomes or something like that, I can do that on the fly and I don't have to worry about going back into Adobe Spark or anything like that. I can just do it inside of my, my Google Slides so that I can sort of mess around with it. The one thing that you will want to make sure is, depending on which font you chose, you're going to want to find a font that sort of matches that. So if I'm over here and I'm sort of looking at the fonts, so I chose permanent marker, I'm not going to want to choose something that doesn't really match with the permanent marker that I chose over here. And one of my favorite things that Adobe Spark does is it saves every single slide that you have ever done, every single image that you have ever done. So you'll see all of the different images from this session, from other sessions that I have done, and I can go in and modify it so that I don't have to make brand new ones that say the same thing. And so you're able to see over time, you get this big sort of expansive understanding of what those particular slides are that really resonate, and you're sort of able to keep on coming back to them. So I'm going to stop at that particular point. That's sort of the first tool that I use, and I'm going to give you back the video of me here. Are there any questions that you have about the ways in which you might use Adobe Spark or creating visuals for your particular session? I want to give you a chance to actually ask that in the chat, or if you would like to join in the video portion, we have a few folks who are joining now, and so you can actually hop in to the video portion to ask your questions live. please do that as well. But I find that Adobe Spark is so easy, and one of my favorite things about it is that you can also do it if you're sort of rushed for time or you want to create a quick visual. You can use your phone or your iPad. And so the iPad also has the ability to do the Adobe Spark app, and it works really seamlessly, so that you can actually, create these things either on the go, on your phone, those kinds of things that allow for a lot of the visual creation, the ways in which you might support people in deepening their thinking. So that's sort of tool number one. Please do ask any questions you have about that. Otherwise, I'm going to share my screen once again, and we're actually going to tackle the next thing that I started using as we were thinking of it. So in this slide, the what are you in service of slide, I introduced a graphic organizer. And that graphic organizer, I actually used Google Drawings for. So Google Drawings is essentially like, if you remember Microsoft Paint or one of the other drawing tools that is sort of so simple. I can diagram, I can create things. It's really, really easy to use, but it's pretty sophisticated. And you can use it in a lot of different ways. So rather than creating it in Word and like printing it off, if I create this as a Google drawing, I can both do that sort of printed version, but I can also send people a link to this and they can make a digital copy for themselves. They can edit it. They can actually put hyperlinks or pictures and those kinds of things. So one question before we move into sort of how to use Google Drawings Paula had was, just to be clear, you can drag those slides into Google. And so I'm just going to switch back over briefly over to the Adobe Spark, and I'm going to pull up one of the ones that I did for a different session. I'm just opening and editing that same one. So once you are done with the creation process of the slide, you click on the share button, you download it as a picture, so it's like a JPEG picture, and then all you have to do is drag and drop that over into your Google Slides. And so you can use this because you're just downloading a picture at the end of the day. You can use this in PowerPoint if you're developing your slides in PowerPoint because it's just a picture, okay? And you can also use it in Google Slides because anything that you want to add as an image, you can just drag and drop. Now, if you're on a PC, it works the exact same way. Oops. PC, it'll create the image the exact same way, and it will put it onto the slide. And all you have to do is make sure that you have downloaded the image to support your folks in learning. So it looks like we may have had a slowdown in the network here, and it's looking like it's struggling to catch up. I'm going to quit a couple programs just to make sure we've got everybody here. Ooh. I'm going to hop out of that one. And so, so once you have it, it will drag in right here, and then you can manipulate it. Paula, thank you so much for that question. I really appreciate you asking that. And so, yep, you just put it in there into the Google Slides presentation. Yep. So now let's look back at our Google Drawings. And in any Google service that you are in, you want to create a new Google drawing, a new Google Slides. You just click, you click File, and then click New. You can, from there, so if you're in a Google document, you're already in a spreadsheet, whatever you're in, you click File, New, and you can create one of those types, okay? Or you can go to Drive and do New and create that drawing. But I'm gonna do File, New, or Create, Google Drawing, and it's gonna start out, it might not be the dimensions that I want it to be. It might not be sort of the size of a piece of paper, or if I want it to be a poster. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to title it what I want it to be. So I'm going to just say graphic organizer, up like that. And then under File, you can actually change the page setup from the standard 4x3 to a widescreen. If you want to create another slide, you can actually use drawings for that. Or what I most often do is I actually use custom, and I change this up to be 8.5 by 11, which is the size of a piece of paper. Okay, so that's the portrait version of that. And if I want it to be landscape, then I can do 11 by 8.5. And so what you get there is your ability to create the graphic organizer, to create what it is that you want it to look like. And so what you can start playing around with are the shapes. Let's say we wanted to do a quick Venn diagram. And one thing that you might have noticed is that when you start drawing a shape, it's going to start sort of however you want to draw it. It's going to give you this sort of big old oval shape and everything like that. But if you want it to be a real circle, if you hold down Shift, so if you don't hold down Shift, it goes in all different ways. But if you hold down Shift, it'll actually make it into a circle that is a perfect circle. Okay? So it'll give me that circle. We're just going to do a quick Venn diagram. And if I do a copy and paste, so Command C and Command V, or if you just want to do the web clipboard where you can copy the shape and then paste it, you can do it that way. But I'm going to copy it and I'm going to paste it, which is essentially just duplicating it. And I'm going to move it over. And now I got to mess around with, because they're both blue. So how do I mess around with that? I go up here and change the fill color to transparent. You can do that. I can change the design of the line. So I want this one to be dotted. I want this one to be a long dot, okay? And then I can change how thick I want that line to be. So now we got some really cool patterns here. And then I'm gonna change the text to be up here. We're gonna say that things that are both awesome and terrifying, okay? And so what we can do here is, once again, we can do all of our lovely formatting things. So I'm gonna make it center justified. And one of the things that you can do is if you hold down Shift, you can select all of the items. And I'm just gonna make it so it's right in the center. And you can, obviously mess around with where you want each of those individual items to be. And so you can have people make a copy. So in order to do that, though, they need to be able to access it. So this is the Google Drawing. So if I share the Google Drawing up there with the top right button, so share that Google Drawing, and then get the shareable link, then what that allows me to do is to copy and paste that into my Google Slides presentation. So you see that this image over here on the left actually links to a Google Drawing that allowed people to make a copy. So all you have to do is create that Google Drawing of the graphic organizer, or however you want people to be brainstorming, and they can make a copy of it. Now, if you want everybody to actually be editing that Google Drawing, so we wanted to collaboratively do this Venn diagram, the way in which you might use sticky notes, then what you can do is actually change the permissions up here, up top, from anyone with the link can view to anyone with the link can edit. And so that people don't have to actually make a copy, rather, they can actually come in and edit it together. So that way, you're actually just creating one document for everybody versus everyone making a copy of that document in order to sort of support their learning and support their visualization of whatever subject or topic you want to have them look at. Right, so that's a brief overview of Google Drawings and the way in which you sort of format it so that it can be printed out, or the way in which you format it so that people can interact, edit, and those kinds of things. So I'm going to take a pause. We'll stop presenting, bring it back. Please do answer any questions that you, or excuse me, ask any questions that you might have about the use of the Google Drawing. And that should allow us a little bit of time and space. Pause for a moment. So we've talked about the visual aspect of how you can create those slides. We've talked about the ways in which you digitally create those visual thinking maps, graphic organizers, the way in which you create handouts digitally so that you can support people's thinking both in the digital space as well as in the physical space, if you're printing it out on paper or you're creating posters and things like that. So that to me is a really good way of sort of starting people thinking, starting people to think down the road of how is it that we might better support people thinking and make this session a little bit more engaging and ask those questions. Okay. So David West is asking, do you think it's better to allow for whole group edits or make a copy, or does it depend on your purpose? I think that's a brilliant question. And so when you are making the decision about that, it really depends on the purpose of both the activity and what you want the reflection on that activity to be. So if you want it to be a shared experience, meaning that you're actually trying to model collaboration, you're actually trying to model the ways in which teachers are working together and sort of build some knowledge together the way you would using sticky notes, you know, up at the board and things like that, then you want to make it so that everyone can edit the same document. One thing to note is that if you have more than 50 people in a room, they won't all be able to work on the same document. Hopefully you're not facilitating too many sessions that have more than 50 people in the room, but it is kind of a hard limit that Google uses to make sure that like the servers don't break down and all that kind of stuff. However, if you want everyone to take their own learning with them, you want them to have a copy in their Google Drive, or you want them to have something to take back, meaning like this is something that they are going to be working on over time, letting them make a copy can be hugely valuable. It really does support them in sort of owning that a little bit more, right? Like it's not a shared document, it is something that they own personally. And this goes for if you're making Google Docs, if you're making them sort of use a template for PowerPoint or things like that in Google Slides. You're going to want to think about the ways in which or the purpose by which you want people to use that knowledge, use that particular strategy. So that's just totally up to you. I'm sorry we don't have time to think about, I was just looking at the this graphic organizer. I wanted to brainstorm things that are both awesome and terrifying, but I think we probably should move on from there. So David, hopefully that answers your question and lets you sort of have that level of insight. But again, just file, new, and that allows you to create a document, spreadsheet, presentation, or most importantly, drawing. All right, so I'm going to turn back on the screen sharing. Boo, boo, boo. And let's take a look at something that we use next. So in this session, I actually asked you to share using a hashtag. Now, the hashtag is sort of dependent upon Twitter, and I set up a separate site for this. But one of the things that I like to do most is to get people to think about the way in which they are sharing their learning. And so sharing your learning on a hashtag means that other people can see it. You're making it very transparent. And so one of the tools that I use a lot for this is called Tagboard. And if you go to tagboard.com, and I'll copy this over to our little chat here, is that you can actually use hashtags to start looking at what people are sharing. So I'm going to do APS moves the boxes tag, and it's going to go out and search not only Twitter, but it's also going to look at many other different tools. So this is an Instagram. this is a Twitter post, but both of these are being shared using this common hashtag. Let's look at another one. Let's look at EdChat. EdChat is a huge educational Twitter chat that allows for people to share their knowledge, share their thinking. And what you can do is you can filter it by network, so you can see what's going on Twitter, you can see what's going on, and you can see really cute things that are happening all around the world using this common hashtag. And so the real point of using a hashtag for a session is to think about how are all of your participants, how are every single one of your participants sharing. So I'm going to just filter by Instagram and see if anybody's sharing, or by Google Plus, and take a look at that. But one of the things that you're doing there is you're asking people to think critically about the ways in which they are sharing their learning and how you want them to come together as a community. How is it that you want them to share links? How is it that you want them to share their ideas? And if you set it up where people are actually engaging in that, then it really does allow for a lot of learning together. It lets them show up as people, whole people, both online and in the physical space. And so that's sort of the reason why we use hashtags, and the session that you will, or excuse me, the tool that you will use for the in-service day is just going to be bit.ly/shareAPS. And what's great about that is that you actually have the ability to share a very short link, and people can actually share their ideas whether they have a Twitter account or not. They're going to use it using the hashtag APS 2020. So I don't know that we need to pause there, because it was essentially just looking at the ways in which we will use specific tools, excuse me, specific hashtags. So I don't think there's a lot of value there in sort of doing that pausing. But if you do have a question about how you can use Twitter hashtags in your professional learning, please do go ahead and ask that. Otherwise, I think what we want to do is we actually want to keep on going through the session, want to keep on going through what it is that I facilitated last week, and see what is the next tool that we started to use. So you see me use, once again, the Adobe Spark post or Spark app to create these visuals, and then all I did was create this set of links on top of it. So the way in which I did sort of making it look like it was in the book is simply by rotating the font. And so you can rotate it any which way you might want, just by using this little indicator up top there, and you can make it look like it's a part of a book, or put it into a particular part of a slide. Okay, but the one thing that a lot of folks were really asking about when we were doing the session was when I turned on the slides Q&A. And so this is the next tool that we want to talk about. And the way in which you do this is in any slideshow that you own, or that you've created or been a part of, you can actually present that slideshow simply by going to the very right of the present button and clicking on the presenter view. So if you click on the presenter view, what happens is it does two things. It starts the presentation from wherever you were in that slideshow, and then it creates this other thing over here, and I'm just going to expand it so you can see it a little bit better. So you see over here my, oops, go over like that. So you see over here, this is my presentation. So imagine this is what's being projected, and this is what's not being projected. So if you turn off mirroring on your computer and you project this and keep this over on your computer or on another desktop, what you can do is you can see all of your speaker notes, right? I can see all of the things that I had as my facilitation. I can go forward, next, back, and all those kinds of things. But I can also use this audience tool, which creates, if I click the Start New button, It creates this brand new link that you can use with your session. And what it'll do is on the presentation that you're using, right over here, it'll put that in big, bold letters where you're supposed to go to ask questions, to respond to the session, and all of those kinds of things. And if I open that up, then you get to see this format right here where people get to ask questions. They can do so anonymously, but they only have 300 characters to do that. And so I'm going to just type in, what is the good word? Question mark. And if I go back to the presentation itself, nothing has changed. This is the same thing that was being presented. But if I want everyone in the room to see that question at the same time, I can click the present button, and then it shows to everybody. It still has that link up top to ask a question, but it actually shows to everyone whatever it is that I want to show based upon what's being collaborated on and shared within the Q&A. Now, one of the things that's a huge feature of the Q&A is that everyone that's participating can either upvote it or they can downvote it. And what's great about that is when multiple questions come in and say, what is going on here? And this shows up underneath this one because this one has one upvote. And the reason why that's valuable is, let's say you actually want people to consider a number of options. You can have them type in the number of options and then have them systematically upvote them, and you would be able to see what rose to the top. Or you can let people ask questions, and if other people have those same questions, then they can upvote those, and they can see that at the top again, where you're saying, oh, I have that question too, +1 that question. You're essentially allowing that to happen. And so you can, once again, if that question raises to the top, you can click the present button, and I do recognize that there should be a question mark there rather than a period. But you're essentially saying what is you're able to present that in the moment. You don't have to collect all those sticky notes and then put them up. You're able to do that in the moment. And so this Q&A allows me to have this level of interactivity in the moments where I want it. And when I don't want to, turn it off, and then great, I don't have to worry about it. Turn it back on. Now I'm accepting questions again. And one of the things that I like perhaps most about this way of doing the Q&A is that all of this is archived. Now, did you notice when I clicked the exit button, it actually shut that second part down? So if I wanted to come back to that, okay, we do the same thing, and then we can continue the recent one that we already had, and then we just start from where we left off, right? It has all of the questions that we had there from before. But let's say that I'm all done, but I can't remember who participated and who didn't. So what I want to do is I actually want to take a look back at my Q&A history. So in Google Slides, you can actually use the Q&A history to take attendance, to take a look at who participated most. But I can see, and this was the one that we did together during our facilitation, I can see all of the posts that were left from every single person within the session. And there were, a few dozen of those posts, both anonymous and from people. There's one from someone who's attending right now. So David West has put that in there. And it really does make it a lot easier for me to go back through and address questions after the fact, kind of share ideas and those kinds of things. So that's Slides Q&A. That's a pretty deep integration if you are looking at it like that. So I'm going to pause. I'm going to stop the presentation here and allow you, if you have questions, things that you're thinking about, please do share them in the chat. But the Slides Q&A, if you want to read more about it, there was a really great release. It was released just this last May. But actually, there's a great video of how how a particular student, a science fair recipient, actually used Slides Q&A with a rather large audience as a great example. And one of the things that Slides Q&A does really well is it works cross-platform. So it works if you've got a phone, it works if you've got a tablet or a PC. You're able to use the same tool to interact with your audience no matter what platform they are using. So if you have questions about Slides Q&A, please do leave them in the chat there. Some really good questions that have been asked already. And then I'd like to head on in to the very final tool if there aren't any further questions, although we may have time for 2 here because there may be just a little bit of time left here at the end. So I'm going to start up the screen share one more time, and we will take a look. So now that we have done our Slides Q&A, and we talked about essentially all of the different things within the facilitation, we wanted to talk about the ways in which you can create ongoing communities of practice, or VLCs, virtual learning communities, to support your session, to support your community of learners over time. And the 2 tools that we wanted to sort of highlight, one is Google+, which is super easy to use and is a great professional learning space. So inside of this particular professional learning space, we see lots of folks who are interacting and who are taking part in the VLC. But one of the things I wanted to do was show you how you create one from scratch. So if you're inside of Google+, which is just plus.google.com, and you click on communities, what you get are all of your communities, but then you get this ability to create a community. And so when you click on the Create the Community button, you can actually do this very, very easily inside of Google+ and say, fun learners, exclamation point. You get to decide how public you want this to be. Is this public for everybody? Is this private? And if you're in your own APS Google account, there's even one level further, which is just within APS. And so you can just share it to those folks. And then there's this other part of the privacy aspect that you can turn on, which is ask people, where people have to ask to join. So if they have to ask to join, then you have to approve them. If you do not want to approve people when they ask to, or when they come to your community, then don't do that. Or you can turn this on where you are reviewing posts that are being submitted. So where you want to moderate every single post that comes in, you want to say yes to this post, no to this post. I generally make it as public and as easy as possible because that lowers the barrier to entry. But once I've created this community of fun learners, then I get to start posting using this little pencil icon down in the bottom right. I say, how is everyone doing? And I can use an image if I want to do that. I can pull from any of the images that I have used at other times in the past. I can upload new photos, okay? Or I can add a link. I'm going to add a link to Google. Or I can, if I want to, add a poll, okay? So a poll allows me to add a picture. It allows me to add a choice. So let's change this question from which or what is your favorite color? Question mark. And I'm going to choose green, blue. And that allows for people to actually select that as an option. People will be able to say yes, green or blue or whatever it is. You're able to ask questions. Now, if you want to make this a little bit more sort of responsive, or you want it to be a little bit more catered to the needs of your community, you can go into your community settings, change what you might want to be notified about, change the way in which it'll show up in your stream, or if you go to edit community, you can change the picture. So the picture that shows up right now, it's just these 3 different dots. You can change the tagline. This is where people come to learn about fun. Okay, you can change the description, you can add categories that people can post to, you can add links that people can be supported by, and all of that shows up automatically. It'll refresh here, and then we've got our Google+. Now, for those of you who think Google Plus is a little too public, it's something that you don't want to dive into, one thing to note is that you also have access to Google Classroom. And Google Classroom is something that is available only to educational institutions. But once you go to classroom.google.com, and I'll just copy this over in case you haven't seen it into the chat here, you can create your own classroom, and it looks a lot like Google+, but it is private to only people you invite or give the classroom code to. So I'm going to do the same thing over here, fun learners, exclamation point. And it'll create that class of fun learners, and then it'll have the exact same things of like posting and things like that, but you get some added features. If you want to create an assignment for your community, if you want them to answer a specific question and have threaded discussion, you can do that. If you want to specifically invite people, you can use this classroom code, or you can invite anyone. And so I can invite David West. Hopefully it'll find, yep, David West right there. I'm going to invite him as a student, and he will show up directly inside of my classroom once he goes to classroom.google.com. I can upload a photo just like I would. I can change my description, add links, all of those kinds of things. But this is a little bit more of a structured environment than Google+. And so if you haven't played around in here to create those kinds of communities, I will let you know that I will be using a Google Plus VLC for both of my sessions on Friday. And that's going to be the tool of choice for me because there's a lot more that I can do where I have actual assignments during the class, and then I can actually let people connect over time after the class. So that for me is the tool of choice for doing PD where you need a little bit more structure, and then Google Plus is for those times where you need a little bit less structure. Okay, so I'm gonna do one more time of stopping. There will be one additional tool, and then we are gonna wrap it all up. But I did wanna sort of let folks, if they have any questions regarding VLCs, if you have any questions that you're thinking about the way in which you get people into the VLC, get people to come together and actually have that discussion online, because it's a little bit different. So one of the things to note if you are having people actually respond to something online is that questions are the currency of online discussions. It is not enough just to say, you know, nice job, or this is a great point. Questions are what drive online discourse. And so if you are asking for people to respond, don't just say, you know, share the one thing that resonates with this. Share one thing that resonates and one question you have. And when you do that, you can actually further the discussion a lot more because those questions tend to drive more depth and more understanding rather than just sort of pointing those individual things out. It's really valuable to sort of ask people to think of their own questions and then to answer one another's questions. Okay. One thing to note is a lot of people will do, all right, watch this video, respond, or read this article and respond inside of the VLC. And I would caution you to think about the ways in which you actually blur the lines between the online and offline world when you are doing that. So you might ask the question in the face-to-face and put that up on a big slide and then get them to respond online. Or you have the experience and then get them to reflect online. Or you have the online experience and then you debrief in the real world, right? So you're not just saying, all right, when we want to do this activity, it's just online, or we want to do this, this is the face-to-face. It's the blending of the two that actually starts to create the community over time. So that's just something to really think about, and ways in which you might wanna tackle it. I don't see any additional questions in our lovely little chat. So what I am going to do is we'll share the last little bit, and then we are going to wrap for the day. All right. So the last thing that I showed in my session on facilitation is the actual feedback, which was done inside of a Google form. A Google form is really fantastic for getting feedback from your session, for asking lots and lots of questions. It really does make it super easy for folks to provide responses. And so inside of the Google Forms, you can ask all different kinds of questions, but there have been a lot of really great recent features. So what I wanted to do is just go to forms.google.com or go to Google Docs and then create a form. And we're going to talk about a couple of the amazing features that they have added most recently. Okay, so I just created a brand new form inside of Google Forms, and they've really upped their game on the visual side of things too. We're going to call this 2-question reflection. And so I can do a form description, all of those kinds of things. But what's great is I have a number of different options for short answer, paragraph questions, multiple choice questions, checkboxes, drop down, linear scale, multiple choice grid. You can even have where they're choosing a date and a time preference for a meeting that you might want to have with people. But I'm going to show what you can do inside of a multiple choice question, where we say, what kind of teacher are you? Question mark. And we say elementary teacher, secondary teacher. And totally typical question, you might ask about a demographic, but let's say that we wanted to differentiate between those two different people, those two different types of teachers. If you choose this little 3-dot button over here and you click on Go to Selection based upon the answer, actually create a new section only for your elementary teachers that only they would see. So I'm going to add a section just by clicking on this Add Section button. And we'll call this elementary teacher questions. And then we'll create another section that we will call secondary teacher questions. And so based upon their response, if they choose elementary teacher, we want it to go to that section. If they choose secondary teacher, then we want it to go to that section. And what we can do is allow for the questions to be added right here. So we're going to add a question, and I'm just going to move it down so that it's in the right section. Bada boom. Oops. Come down here. Come on down. And so what you can do is have the questions that you want to be in the right spot. Oops. I want that one to be up here. And then I want my new question to be down here. And so you can add multiple nested questions. So only elementary questions. How do you teach kids to read? Have that be a question that is answered in a paragraph. You can require that question. I'm going to duplicate it and said, what support do you need from others? Okay, so now I have these questions that are specific to elementary teacher, and then at the end, I can actually have it submit the form rather than go on to the next section. So it's 2 questions based upon the 1 question up top. Now this right here allows for me to differentiate my form based upon what kind of teacher they are. The other things that are more recent, which is really great, is you can actually add images to the question. So you can actually add an image. I just want to search for elementary teacher so that they have a visual representation of it. I'm going to select this one for that, and it shows up just like that. Oops. Secondary teacher, have it go to our secondary teacher questions. And I can do the same thing over here, secondary teacher. And so that the visual of this, and it looks like we're getting a whole bunch of international folks, but let's go with this. This looks like a secondary teacher here. And so when I visualize this, okay, what kind of teacher are you? You see that they're actually selecting the visual component. And this is great for students, especially at the elementary level, where they might not know what the words mean, but they know what the visual looks like. And so they actually are selecting now based upon that, and they can type in their response. So once you are in here, and I'll just open my editor back up, one of the things that you're going to want to look at is how widely this particular submission can go, or this particular form can go. You can limit it to one response. If you're in your APS Google account, you can actually limit it only to other Aurora students and teachers. You can actually allow people to see each other's responses. You can shuffle the questions. You can allow people to submit more than once. And if you actually want to make this a quiz where there are right responses and they can see what the correct answers are, what point values are, you can actually create quizzes now inside of Google Forms. Hopefully everyone's mind has been sufficiently blown. So lots of things that you can do that are advanced inside of Google Forms that didn't used to be available. Pictures within your questions, quizzes, different ways of having people respond based upon who they are and sort of differentiating within the form. And then if you want to go to the level of actually adding some things on, there are lots of add-ons that you can get for your Google Forms that let you get automatic responses, that let you send emails based upon which response you receive, all kinds of good stuff. But definitely something to continue to look at, as it is a great tool for you to use throughout your PD and even in your teaching and what you can recommend for teachers. All right, that's the last tool. I think we hit everything that we might have wanted to. Lots of really great resources here. But again, this was recorded. So if you want to highlight or go back and see what the individual tools were and how they might work in your facilitation, I wholeheartedly recommend that you do so. Lots of really great things that you can tackle, and I hope that you have a really great in-service on Friday. It's going to be a really great set of, there are almost 60 sessions that are available throughout the district. It's really amazing time to be in Aurora Public Schools. And I'm looking forward to getting feedback from many of you and thinking about how we might support you with these tools even further to the point of sort of sitting next to you and supporting you and asking great questions about, should I use this one? Should I use this one? And the ways in which we might continue to expand the possibilities for PD and for our teachers. Let me know if you have any additional questions. Otherwise, I will bid you adieu. And I really appreciate your time and attention here. And I hope you have a great and fantastic day.